I know who to ask.
Gary, you want to go
All right. I hope everyone enjoyed their lunch, courtesy of Homegirl Catering. All right, we'll turn it over to our next panel.
Great, thank you so much. I hope everybody had a really nice lunch. My name's Tara Ford. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an attorney at Public Counsel. First, I just really want to thank everybody who worked to make this event possible, from the outreach to the library guide to the food registration, timekeeping, program design, and panelists, and for all the substantive work that went into putting together such an amazing conference, and for all of you for being here. Thank you. And joining with others, this panel is just really happy to be here to celebrate Jerry and his work. He's been so inspiring for all of us. His practices have inspired us and continue to inspire us. I just want to lay out our approach to this session. So I'm just really glad to be here with this amazing group of people. As you can read from their bios, they've really walked the walk. Brenda not only is an immigration lawyer who started her own practice and who has thought deeply about what it means to problem solve with her clients, she also teaches and uses effective strategies for social change. Gary has had a full career before he went to law school, and then he took all of that learning to Las Vegas, Nevada, to revitalize the state affiliate of the ACLU. Bill not only founded the ILRC, he's been a national policy leader on immigration issues, long taught immigration law, developed social change curriculums, has robust scholarships, and led clinics that are basically small law firms. Ascanio led social change work in East Palo Alto, a community law practice, and he spent his career training up law students to think deeply about lawyering, about how lawyering might relate to social change, and to challenge the notion of lawyering as central to social change. When we met to talk about the opportunities of this session, it was plain to all of us that the call of the question is how to explore how we live and work rebelliously. To a person, we wanted to say that this isn't about figuring out answers, but rather about the very important work of articulating our experiences about how to align our practices with our vision of rebellious lawyering. Our notions of rebellious lawyering likely differ in many respects. Speaking for myself, different aspects of rebellious lawyering have resonated more centrally at different times over the course of my career. Still, some important themes and ideas emerged as we talked, and we want to really bring those forward today. As Gary emphasized, rebellious lawyering motivates us to make the aspirational real, to think carefully about problem solving with clients, communities, allies, and others, which may include lawyering, but may not, and it doesn't prize lawyering strategies over others. Brenda described rebellious lawyering as an energy, not just a set of practices, but a kind of energy that animates not only our work, but hopefully our lives. Again, our discussion aims to reflect on our work, not as a model, but rather an articulation of how some of the foundational rebellious lawyering concepts have informed our work and the challenges and successes that we found along the way. So really the call of the question is, how are we living and working rebelliously? And I want to first turn to Brenda. The first part of the question that we wanted to explore was, how does this animate our work aspirations with clients, communities, allies, and colleagues? I had the pleasure of rereading Brenda's article on her work starting her business. And she starts her article saying, she gives a quote from Jerry that says, "But for me, as for you, it remains true that we cannot separate who we are from what we try to understand." And so I just wanted to turn the floor over to Brenda so she can talk a little bit about her experience.
Thank you so much, Tara, and to everybody here. I know that there are wonderful immigration practitioners, in the audience, and I don't have the answers really for how to really resolve how to practice rebelliously and make it be successful in every aspect. But I think just beginning with that personal aspect, I know that what really pushed me and what guides me is really that reminder of the privilege that we have for being in this country. And I do speak about it more at length in my article, but my parents were very lucky to become citizens through the 1986 amnesty. Since then, we haven't had any meaningful immigration reform. This has been one of the longest periods in our immigration history without trying to find a more comprehensive solution. Not saying that Reagan had great policies or was benevolent, but fortunately, my parents were able to kind of secure that status. And with that, my mom always reminded me of that privilege. My mom didn't have a college background. She didn't know what CRT was. And she didn't really explain whiteness to me, but she did explain that because I was born in this country, I had an obligation to help others. And without her knowing much about Chicano studies, she would say, "Don't be a Chicana." And for a lot of you, that would mean that's an oxymoron, because I am a Chicana, right? Chicana is a person that was born in the United States, a Mexican-American born in the United States. And what she meant by that was, don't be like the first generation Latinos that go and exploit other immigrants. She would tell me how she would see, Chicanos go pick up jornaleros, workers at Home Depot, have them do a labor's day of work and not pay them, and threaten them with calling ICE. My mom didn't really wasn't part of an official organization crew, but I always say this story because it talks about what you do with the little that you have. She would put us in a bus, go to events to try to support legislation that would legalize driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants. That was years ago when I was a kid. And that really, for me, shaped the way that I thought about my obligation. So to the community and to the immigrant community. I'm blessed with that because I have this purpose of that I've never had to question. There's a lot of attorneys that, and I, again, hate my job sometimes, but I don't have to question my purpose. And that means a lot because everything that we do is really I never have to wake up and say, this is not what I want to do. I really just have to figure out how can I make it profitable so that my staff can survive and so that I can have a meaningful life. How can I provide the best type of service for my client? How can we empower them? And how to act rebelliously within this small office with 2-person staff, sometimes 3. But all in all, I mean, part of the challenges really that we face are what other practitioners face and what, Bill will comment on. But one of them is it makes it impossible when you have administrations that are changing from policy to policy every few weeks. And I believe the way that I would describe those changes in policies are from unfair due process violation, racist, and inhumane. And basically, we go back and forth between that line. That's the line or the range of types of policies that we're battling with. And that, I started practicing since the Obama administration. There were maybe some humane aspects of it, of course, with DACA, but everything else, was absolutely inhumane. I was remembering just one of the cases then, and I know Bill has a million, and I know we don't have time to go over them, but I have a client, we just made him a citizen last week, who he was lucky, right? But he was detained in 2013 when he was on his way from Atlanta to California to see his sick sister. His sister was hospitalized. And on the Greyhound bus, I stopped him and detained him. He never got to say goodbye to his sister. He has no criminal history whatsoever. He actually should have been a resident and a citizen a long time ago. He was protected under 245I. But his parents divorced when his USCIS interview took place when he was about 14 or 15, and the parents never made it to that interview. And so that is part of the Obama legacy, right? And then we had Trump, which of course, so much to unpack there. But the truth is that the Biden administration is no different, right? I mean, right now we're dealing with the transit ban. That's Biden's transit ban, inspired by Trump. And we have clients right now who are detained at Otay Mesa, who I have to explain this very complicated process that a credible fear interview used to be a very simple interview where an asylum officer determines whether a person is lying or not, or has somewhat of a valid claim to asylum. But now these interviews are a gatekeeper, essentially made to target Central American and Mexican immigrants, to the point that if they did not request asylum in a different country, in Mexico for most of them, they are ineligible for that credible fear interview, which makes them eventually eligible for asylum. What they're doing is that they're making sure they're finding ways to make it impossible for anybody to even have an opportunity to request for asylum. It doesn't matter whether they've killed their family members. It doesn't matter the abuse that they've suffered. They essentially have made it impossible to even hear their story. So part of how difficult it is to be a practitioner is having to explain these changes to our clients. And how do you do that when the level of education sometimes that they've gone through has been, sometimes 6th grade or less? Some of them just have never had that guidance. But I really do believe, and I think this is in large part what rebellious lawyering taught me, was our clients can really understand if you break it down. And you go through with them no matter, I have to be wiser with the time that I spend, but if usually our detained visits are 2 hours to 2 hours and a half, because that's how long it takes to be able to break down the law to them, to explain it to them, and to also explain to them what are the tricks that the asylum officers are using to disqualify them from asylum. Without going to the specific, just how horrible immigration policies are, the difficulty is also just how long immigrants have to wait for their cases to be heard. A lot of times we have clients that have been waiting about 3 to 4 years, if not more, in immigration court. They eventually, right now the Biden administration is offering prosecutorial discretion that allows immigrants who are not a priority for enforcement, don't have a criminal record, to essentially ask for them to be removed from immigration court. The problem is that now we have a mess with the asylum offices, and now they're going to have to wait another 5 to 7 years for that interview. We don't know because, again, we're also not aware as practitioners. But it is really difficult to explain to families that have their, spouses and partners and their children abroad, to tell them you have to wait another set of years, and the likelihood of you being able to visit your family is basically non-existent. But just the realities of being a private practitioner, really, one of the hardest things that I've had to face is mostly with financial cost. At the end of the day, I represent very humble clients, and a lot of them are struggling. They've paid coyotes or smugglers about $15,000 to $30,000 to get into the United States. A lot of them are kept in safe houses where really it's cartel members having weapons, threatening them if they reveal the location of the place. They then come to the United States. They don't know what's going on. If they want to hire an attorney for their credible fear interview process, that's a cost. If they want to be released from bond, that's an additional cost. During the Trump administration, I went to a bond hearing in Arizona. The trial attorney asked my client, how much did your family pay for the smuggler? He said $25,000. So the judge said, $25,000 is your bond amount. And that's very common. The statute says judges can start off with $1,500 as a bond amount. But we're seeing judges more and more giving bond amounts of $10,000 and above. So when it comes to me charging clients for that representation, it's difficult because I know how much they've gone through. I know how much they're spending. And part of the difficulty is knowing how to balance that need. And then just other difficulties is really just the lack of coalition building. I'm a private practitioner, and we have wonderful nonprofit organizations that are helping the immigrant community. But the truth is that they're that connection between private practitioners and nonprofit organizations is kind of tricky. I was very privileged to work with Southwestern Law School, with their removal defense corps, and even in their clinical teachings. And, you get to see kind of there's a stereotype, and a lot of it is justified, right? We have the nonprofit community that says there are, terrible attorneys and terrible attorneys that take advantage of immigrants. And then we have, I'm part of like these wonderful committees in the private sector that say, well, nonprofits don't like sharing their resources, right? And that's the problem that is created there is that instead of kind of uniting together and sharing resources, it becomes really difficult. And I love the ILRC, but, I think that there is a lack of consideration, not just entirety in the community. For practitioners such as myself, who really have a limited income, to be part of AILA, these bar associations, LACBA, it costs money. And so when I'm helping a pro bono case because I know that the family can't pay me, and I'm seeking help from resources, and again, I do put the LRC as an example because I've always advocated that there should be a separate section between private practitioners, nonprofit, and income-based. To be able to seek help, for example, in this one case where I have really exhausted all of my resources, an hourly or to get a consultation would be $300. That's difficult for me to pay that out of pocket, right? So, and again, these are things that we're working with, and I know that we can improve on having more of these types of communications. But yes, I mean, it's kind of that difficult aspect. And so when we are when I'm faced with clients that are having difficulty with comprehending the law, and we sit them down, I suppose the way that I try to see myself, how can I make this survive in the long term, is really just trying to remember that I just need to empower this one client. I just need to limit kind of the caseload and do the best that I can, or do the best that we can, to try to kind of help and maneuver that one family. Because at the end of the day, if I kept on thinking, okay, my client will get removed, or there's this injustice that I can't overcome, it'd be very easy to just kind of give up on that end. Yeah.
Thank you, Brenda. I think just trying to really think hard about the purpose of the work and the practicalities that are limiting the circumstances for our clients and our clients' communities and for the practitioners is just such a hard thing that we grapple with. And I think Gary can talk a little bit about kind of what this has looked like in his world, particularly in the ACLU of Nevada and the work he was doing there.
Thank you so much. I'm Gary. I've known Jerry for most of his 270 years on the face of the earth. And I do want to just digress for 1 minute. There's a lot of love in this room for Jerry. I don't want to get emotional. There's a lot of love in this room for Jerry, and there should be. It's rare that I tell Jerry he's just wrong. His humility is admirable. I adore him for that. I adore him for the way he lifts us all up. I'm realizing Jerry cheats on me. I call him about 3 times a week, but apparently 35 people in the room call Jerry 3 times a week. I don't know. But it's not a false humility, but it's just misplaced. Jerry has clearly had an unbelievable impact on people in this room who have done unimaginably great work, oftentimes against great odds, oftentimes when you knew the chances of winning any particular fight were slim. But you also knew, partly because of Jerry and partly because of your own smarts and your own savvy, you also knew that the fight itself made fighting worthwhile. That's part of the way you build community. That's part of the way you earn the trust of people in the community. That's part of the way you learn how to trust people in the community. Me, when Jerry says, oh, a bunch of you were ready when you showed up in my class, I just stepped back and, Jerry did know how to create space and time for people in his class. In fact, I was a professor before I went to law school. It was humbling to be in Jerry's class, both as a professor and as a soon-to-be aspiring advocate, like professional advocate, whatever the hell that means. But it is just, it's indisputable that he changed my life. I can speak for myself with some moral authority because most of the time I was straight and I wasn't stoned, and I actually remember my pre-Stanford years. But no, really, in high school I majored in pot, partying, and not going to school. Then I got to college, and my first semester was pretty much pot, partying, and not going to school, and I was flunking out. So I got a draft number, and I joined the Navy to avoid Vietnam, and I was consistent. I concentrated on pot, partying, and not doing much work, and I was discharged from the Navy after a year. It's a true story, can't make that up. And when I got to Stanford, I was so struck by some of the comments that some people were making about their experiences in law school. I was coming off a postdoc at the University of Chicago. I like to call it Craig Futterman's school. I was coming off a postdoc at Craig Futterman's school. And I remember being in torts class. I've told Jerry this story and others this story many times. And I'm in torts class. It's like the second week. I had Jerry for contracts. It was like the greatest gift ever. I can't even remember who I think I had him for my small section, contract small section. What a great gift that was. And I'm in torts class, and the guy is just blathering on, and I'm having a hard time even figuring out what exactly it is he's trying to. I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but I had no idea what he was talking about. And he got to the point where he said, literally, I've never forgotten it. He said, we as a society decide to build bridges all the time, even though we know people are going to fall off of scaffolding and die. But we think it's worth the risk because we need bridges like the Golden Gate Bridge. Well, I was a sociology professor. My area of concentration actually was work, and I was particularly interested in occupational safety and health issues, so I sheepishly raised my hand. Not really sheepishly, I raised my hand up high, Ken. And I said, man, I have no idea who this cosmic we is. But, that's not the way I understand society working. It's like way more complicated conflicts and cleavages. And when you say we, what you really mean is some people decide to build bridges in a particular way, and other people with limited choices decide to go work on those bridges, even though they know some of them are going to fall off of scaffolding and maybe die. Well, he was really unhappy about that. He came in the next class, I swear to God, I don't know why I shouldn't go on with this, but he came in the next class. And he literally said, big classroom like this, he said, Mr. Peck, he's talking to the whole class, he said, Mr. Peck, I can't even remember the context, but I remember this part. You could be riding down the street on a bicycle on University Avenue in Palo Alto, and a pickup truck would drive down the street and squish you into the concrete. I'm like, whoa. Whoa. So I went to Jerry immediately. Honest to God, true story. I went to Jerry immediately and I said, fuck this, man. I knew I was there. I was there because I saw the role of law and lawyers in very dynamic fights over safety and health issues. Particularly, I cut my teeth on the Brown Lung Association, which was retired and active cotton textile workers. Happened to be in law school with someone I knew from the Brown Lung Association who became one of my dear friends. I'll say his name out loud, Tom Brudney, one of the smartest people and most decent human beings ever, who passed away a couple of years ago, had Parkinson's. Just an unbelievable guy. I think Jerry would confirm that without question. He couldn't get, talk about merit. He couldn't get a clerkship. I can never figure that out. He was like one of the smartest dudes I ever met anywhere in my entire life. Deep, thoughtful, decent, unbelievable. So I said to Jerry, I don't know, man. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here, but I think I need to get out. I can go back to they'll let me come back to the postdoc for one more year and go back to Chicago. And Jerry literally said, sorry if his colleagues are here, Jerry literally said, Gary, I will totally, I don't know if he remembers the exact conversation because he's had, again, he cheats on me. He's got like 9 million comments. He said, Gary, I will totally get it if you decide that what you want to do is quit law school. He says, I can relate, I can empathize. I did that once. And he did. He said, but don't quit because some law professor is a fucking asshole. That's a bad reason to quit law school. And he said, you should just give it a shot, do the best you can, see how it goes. I'm not going to tell you what to do because that's not how I roll. But, give it a shot. And I gave it a shot. And it's entirely because Jerry was there. I had a lot of other friends who are in this room who I haven't seen in a long time, who also had profound impact on my life in all kinds of positive ways. But had it not been for Jerry, I would have just been out of there. I literally would have gone and packed my bags and gone back to Chicago and figured out some path for myself. So anyway, fast forward. So I just want to say, I think we should all give Jerry one more round of applause. So come on. He'll never forgive me, and his cheating days are over because I'll never hear from him again. So, the ACLU of Nevada. I couldn't even begin to patch together for you my career, quote unquote, if that's what you call it. It was a pastiche of gigs. The professor thing that I was doing in a really serious way. My intellectual curiosity was sparked. My second try at graduate school, it was sparked. And I got deeply involved in politics. I was in North Carolina. I went to graduate school in Chapel Hill. And that's how I got involved with the Brown Lung Association, because that's where the action was, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia. And, but my politics and my intellectual life, though at a kind of abstracted level, they were connected, if you know what I mean. I did my academic work, and it related substantively to the political work. I was really interested in politics, the workplace. That's what I published on. That's what I kind of took seriously. But the actual work itself, the hands-on political work, was completely disjointed from how I lived my everyday academic life, which was, go to seminars, go to classes, read your stuff, write papers, do your thesis, do your dissertation. And so I kind of put a bunch of jobs together, none of them particularly satisfying. The last one before I took the gig at the ACLU of Nevada, which at least one person on this stage said to me when I told him I was going to the ACLU of Nevada, said, "Are you out of your ever-loving mind? You're moving to Las Vegas, Nevada? This is the craziest idea ever. You're crazy." But I had been at a Georgetown public policy clinic, Georgetown Law School public policy clinic. It would be hard for me. I don't mean to trash anybody. Some people probably loved it. It was painful for me. It was just, everything about it was incredibly painful. I was there mostly because someone in my family, my stepdad had prostate cancer, so I wanted to be back in D.C. So I left the United Electrical Workers, a radical rank-and-file union, which first rank-and-file union in the United States to do cross-border organizing. Like, they dedicated staff to going into Mexico and organizing workers in the maquiladoras, because they said all this buy American stuff, it's all bullshit. It's a way to pit workers against each other. The only way we're going to get fair wages and decent working conditions is if we organize independent trade unions in the maquiladoras in Mexico. So it was a great union. It was wonderful. So I got asked to, I don't even know how somebody from usually I was scuffling around, but somebody called me from the ACLU and said, "Hey, are you interested in being an executive director of an ACLU affiliate?" And I said, "ACLU? I never see the ACLU. In all the work I've done, I've never seen them." And Anna and Andres were wonderful. I wish when I was with the ACLU, no, seriously, I don't want to trash them either. It is what it is. It's Anna and Andres, I would have done cartwheels for 2 miles if I could have hired two people like Andres and Anna for real. But they took me out to Denver, and they interviewed me on another quick anecdote. So one of the deputy executive director says to me, "We've got several openings, and we'll go through them, and you tell us which one you want." And he said, started with Wyoming. And he was a Jewish dude from New York, so we could relate. We were simpatico. I'm from D.C. He said, "Yeah, I swear, you can get bagels in the New York Times in Cheyenne, but I think let's just skip Wyoming." So he did. He literally goes to Nevada, and he offers me this gig in Nevada and some other ones. And I knew this about Nevada: large and burgeoning Latino population, very multi-ethnic, multicultural, multiracial Latino population. A small but very rich black community on the west side of Las Vegas with a very rich history of activism, oddly enough. I mean, they marched on the Strip years ago to try to integrate the hotels and casinos. A very robust labor union movement, and I had labor union ties. Very robust labor union movement. Conservatives who, that was then, this is now. A lot of them are just fucking crazy. But in those days, they were, a disproportionate number of them were libertarian. They were all about, keep the government out of my business. I don't want the government telling us what to do. Now that had a positive dimension to it and a negative dimension to it. And then there was the money. A lot of money in Las Vegas. A lot of people with a lot of money. And industries, okay, this probably everybody maybe, I don't know. There's the adult industry, and they worry all the time about their Fourth Amendment rights and their free speech rights, because that's always the defense. Leave us alone, it's free speech. And oh wait, the hotel casino industry. And they don't want anybody messing around in their business, period. Like when that whole Patriot Act thing was going on, you know why Harry Reid was supporting the stronger version of civil liberties friendly version of the Patriot Act? Because of the hotel casinos mainly, and the culinary union. They had a community of interests, right? The better the casinos, the better off the culinary union was. So I said to myself, okay, I'll do that gig. Tell me about the affiliate itself. Well, we have some bad news. There's $25,000 in the bank. It's in receivership. It has no staff, and it has really no program or presence to speak of. So I said to my friend Ascanio, who said, you're out of your mind, I said, he may not even remember. Oh, okay. He said, I don't know if that's how much I have left. Or
That's how long you've been talking.
Okay, 3 minutes. Okay, I'll do this. You told me you were going to interrupt me. Okay. I took the gig, and swear to God, I showed up, and the first thing I thought of was the first assignment Jerry Lopez gave us in his Section 1983 class about some couple whose bar was being rousted by cops all the time, and the question was, how would you go about developing an advocacy plan for helping this couple? And I was working with Tom Brudney. Jerry, I'm not sure, has forgiven me to this day. We turned in the paper a week late because I insisted on turning in a 50-page paper for the first. I was thinking of Dale Manami. So that's what I did. I set about the business of putting my anthropologist and sociologist hat on. I dug as deeply as I could, not just at the grass tops level, at the grassroots level. I learned who all the players were. I learned how they were connected to one another. I set about the business of raising money. And one of the ways I elevated the brand, if you will, already had a brand. One of the ways I elevated the brand was I did what that guy Rick Rubin at the Civil Rights Committee did. I picked up the newspaper and I read an article, and it said, the police, the county commission, and the taxi cab authority have decided to stop every cab in the low-income, overwhelmingly of-color area on the Strip. We're going to search their trunks, we're going to search their persons, and if they don't have a trip ticket, we're going to write up a citation because they don't belong there. And if we find contraband, we're going to... So I'm like, that's a Fourth Amendment violation. So I called up the newspaper and I said, we're the ACLU, and if you don't cut this shit out, we're going to sue your asses. So all of a sudden, they're writing a story. It's on the front page of the RJ. They invite me to come do an interview. It's like the whole sidebar, the editorial section. New ACLU guy in town. And that elevated the stature of the organization. And then because I was able to build an infrastructure, I was then able to do the work rebelliously the way Jerry invites us to do the work. The one key, though, was I tried to find conflicts and issues that had arisen organically in the community. And when I say I went out in the community, I insisted my lawyers do that when I was able to hire staff. I insisted the office manager do that. I insisted the paralegal do that. It was part of the job description I wrote for them. You're going to go out in the community, and people are going to get to know you, and you're going to get to know the people, and you're going to figure out what's going on, and you're going to figure out what matters to these folks, and you're going to learn from them how they think it might be best to fight over these issues. So I did that, and there were lots of issues that were, just organically evolving. And that's how I always tried to do the work. Respect the clients, earn their respect, learn from them, work collaboratively, and work for transformative change, even though, sometimes that's just not, it's not going to happen in the short run, but the fight itself matters a lot and is a big, big deal. So that empowers me.
Thanks so much, Gary. It's actually a great segue to Ascanio. It's a great
Ascanio, do you mind if I turn my time on?
Because I think it really is an opportunity to learn with Ascanio about one of the central tenets of rebellious lawyering, which is what does it mean to work with clients, and how can we reimagine that in a rebellious lawyering way? And so I think it would be great if you would share some of your thinking about that, since you've thought so deeply about rebellious lawyering versus client-centered lawyering, maybe not versus, but as compared.
Tara, the notion of me teaching folks in the room when that guy is back there who has taught us is slightly silly. Everybody is starting with acknowledgments of Jerry, and I would just say, sitting in this room the last, whatever it is, more than 24 hours, I think at this point, one of the things that has really struck me is the power of a teacher. And so many people who are here because of the power of, we're here because we honor Jerry because of the power he has had as a teacher. And now as a parent of a 16-year-old, and just thinking about legal education, the power of a horrible teacher is really palpable too. And folks have talked, I think it was Anna who was talking about the importance of humanity. And I think so much of what Jerry teaches us about living rebelliously is really about being fully human, recognizing everyone's strengths and everyone's weaknesses, and trying to learn from each other. So I wrote a slightly shorter article than Dale Manami called Rebellious Heroes, and it was on the 25th anniversary of Rebellious Lawyering. And in it I think it's a 6-page section on the differences between client-centered lawyering, which I think for folks who've taken clinics and clinical professors in the room, client-centered lawyering is pretty ubiquitously the approach to lawyering that legal clinics teach. It was developed here at UCLA by David Binder and a number of his colleagues, and it's way better than the unspoken approach to lawyering that law school professors at the front of the room model, in terms of the notion that, well, of course lawyers know best. We've taught you to think like a lawyer, and that means knowing more than anybody else and not needing to learn from anybody else other than typically the white guy at the front of the room. So I'm not quite sure why I've been asked to do this little disquisition on the differences between client-centered lawyering and rebellious lawyering, because I think just as everybody has a different view of client-centered lawyering, everybody has a different view of rebellious lawyering and recognizes that at our best, we're rebellious as often as we can be, and it pisses the shit out of us, but sometimes we're regnant. We can't help but recreate institutions, even the ones that we are struggling so hard to challenge. But to me, some of the core value of client-centered lawyering is all about client autonomy, and that's a great thing. To me, rebellious lawyering is about fighting subordination. Client-centered lawyering sees clients as autonomous individuals, often atomized individuals. The role of the lawyer is to serve that particular person. And I think rebellious lawyering is all about seeing people as connected to communities or connectable to communities, and to communities that resist subordination in all of its ugly forms. Client-centered lawyering is apolitical, right? It doesn't have a critique of society. It's about trying to enhance professional technical skills. And it assumes that the legal realm is going to deliver for people the remedies that they need. And it's our job as lawyers to be experts in the legal realm. And clients are experts in the non-legal realm. And, you know, rebellious lawyering teaches us that the legal system can't be the only realm that we operate in, that subordination is everywhere, so working against subordination needs to happen everywhere. To me, the fundamental aim of client-centered lawyering is to perfect the principal-agent relationship, to make sure that we as lawyers are doing for our clients what they actually want us to do for them. I had a wonderful research assistant helping me with one of my articles, basically suggesting my favorite paragraph in that article, which was the key question that client-centered lawyering asks is, what do you want me to do for you? And the key question that rebellious lawyers ask ourselves is, what might we do together? And those are my thoughts on the difference between client-centered lawyering and rebellious lawyering. And I wouldn't have known any of that but for the bald guy in the almost back row. And I deeply appreciate him opening my eyes to a different world.
Bill.
I yield my time to Mr. Peck.
Don't do it.
I thought we were going to do a panel on the Beatles.
I thought so too.
So before, most of my remarks are actually going to be in reflection to Brenda's comments and a little bit to Ascanio and Gary. But first of all, about the man in the room, I actually said this once in New York when Jerry was living there in a public event, that actually my brother Johnny, who has since passed away, who was a Wall Street guy who died of a Wall Street disease, taught me how to read, and he was 3 years older than me. But my brother Jerry taught me how to write. And I have to include Mr. Peck, because the truth is my first academic book, the Asian immigration book, it was actually I'm laying it out here in public. It was actually Jerry and Gary who wrote that book. And so I want to thank them for doing that for me. There are pages and pages in the text, Rebellious Lawyering, that are always on my mind. And so I'm constantly hearing, honestly, Jerry's voice in the back of my mind and reminding me to stop and think. But then after yesterday's panel with Gina Hong on it, now I've got her in the back of my mind, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And so, first with respect, this is very random, but Brenda, I didn't know that your parents benefited from IRCA, and that's great. I want you to know that back then, when the ILRC was developing its outreach to communities on self-help and lay lawyering, Jerry's terms and how to go out in the community. It's actually Juliet Stedman who actually laid the framework for that program that the ILRC did, and that's one example of so many people in this room that, Stephen Carpenter he reminded me yesterday that he was a research assistant of mine. My key to success is to surround myself with people that are smarter than me and have them do the work, and I take the credit. And I'm honestly, I'm never the smartest person in the room. I'm never the most creative. I'm never the most innovative. But I will plead guilty to this, that I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and work. And that's... I'm so disappointed, Brenda, that you find it difficult to find allies, even in the nonprofit sector, to provide some of the support that you need. I know you acknowledge some of the important work that the ILRC provides and the resources. And I want you to know you should call me. Because I after Trump was elected, I opened a second immigration clinic at USF, and that second clinic is largely about service to others. The main immigration clinic is all asylum work, mostly for Central Americans and Mexicans who are applying for asylum or unaccompanied minors. But the other clinic is actually, honestly, it's a reflection, the students who do the work in that clinic, the work is a reflection of my inbox. Because, whenever somebody contacts me, I hardly ever say no. And so Baji, for example, the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, I've now had a partnership with them for 1.5 years, 2 years, because Sion Germu, who is also on the ILRC board, I got to know her, and she's got this aspiration to be a national organization that represents every black migrant in the United States who's facing removal. And she's got this tiny staff, although she should have a bigger staff now because she's got a donation from Mackenzie Scott, okay? But she has this aspiration to serve everybody. And so every semester now, the students in my policy clinic, which is a misnomer, we help her with 6 to 12 cases a semester. And the students do the country conditions and the declarations, sometimes even the I-589s. And it's not the way that I've ever wanted to practice immigration law, because in contrast, in the deportation clinic, it's all about face-to-face time. It's all about understanding that you need hours and hours and many meetings to develop the kind of relationship that's necessary to do a great job in an asylum case. and Baji doesn't have that time. And but we provide that service, and we help because that's all they're able to do. And even in the deportation clinic, and this is where I'm getting to Gina in a minute, we're a legal aid office. We have over 500 cases. It's not a law school clinic, okay? It's a legal aid office. And we don't turn away cases. We have funding from the state, we have funding from the People's Republic of San Francisco, we have funding from San Mateo County, Sonoma County, San Mateo County, thanks to Stacy Harver, and we take cases. We don't cherry pick. We take hard cases, impossible cases, and we win them. And we win them because of the hard work of the supervising attorney, Jacqueline Brown. And people ask me, how and why do I keep on going? And I got upset last night, next door in a friendly way, when I was talking about, don't ever ask me if I'm going to retire, because that's the one question that I hate being asked, because I don't see it, okay? And Mr. Futterman. And so the truth is that it's all about representation. It's all about service. It's all about, and then when I heard what Gina said yesterday about how they're selective, and I'm not critical of you for being selective, but what I admire about you is that the reason why you only have a handful of cases is because of organizing. But I do want you to know, as an old guy in the room, that what you're doing is not new. When I was a San Francisco Neighborhood Legal Assistance Foundation attorney, it's an organization that existed many, many years ago. It actually had neighborhood offices in San Francisco, and the Mission District office of San Francisco had a landlord-tenant unit, and that was exactly the way they operated. They would not take a tenant client unless they agreed to participate in organizing and to and be part of local. So that's happened, and they had a lot of success, and so I wish you the same amount of success in that regard. But now, because of what you said, damn it, and it's Jerry and you. It's like, all right, you're present for the clients. You do this great work for the client. You demystify the process the way Brenda does for the clients. You respect the clients. You don't necessarily have to put them on a pedestal, but you do respect them, and they learn from you. You learn from them. You look for allies. You collaborate the way Ascanio and Jerry have taught us, because you need that to not burn out. You need it to be smart. But my God, Gina, when you say that you work with these clients and they're doing this organizing, I'm saying, what the shit am I doing with the clients that we're winning the vast majority of our cases with, and we're just shaking their hand and saying goodbye, after we get their grant and their green card, and their life goes on. And so between yesterday and today, I called the folks at MUA in San Francisco, Mujeres Unidas y Activas in San Francisco, and because I went on their website and I've helped them fundraise, okay? And I damn it, there's nothing on their website that says that they work with women of victims of domestic violence who may or may not have been successful in their asylum cases, to have a sense of camaraderie, of belonging and becoming, and I'm disappointed. So I called somebody there and just got off the phone right before lunch was there and says that we actually do have a program for them, but we don't put it on our website. And we would love it if you sent what clients are ready to come, because they'll find that there's space for them, and we're looking for more energy. Anyway, so that was important, Gina. I say this so much, and it's so true, that the work that I do is it comes to me, and you know, when Chesa Boudin, the progressive district attorney of San Francisco, before he was outed or ousted, he came to me and said, "Hey, you know, your immigration clinic, will you create a diversion program?" I said, "Diversion program for whom?" He said, "Well, as you may or may not know, there are a lot of young Honduran teenagers that are being arrested for selling fentanyl in the Tenderloin, and you know, I don't want to just send them to jail. And so, would you mind taking some of them and monitoring them?" And I said, "Well, let me check, you know, because I will answer that question yes if I have smart students like Juliet and Steve Carpenter and Craig Futterman available to help me say yes, and if there's students that are willing to take that on." So since that, we've it's not a whole lot of people, but you know, there's 20 folks that successfully stayed with us for 4 to 6 months, and they never filed the charges against them. And it's dangerous work, though, because a couple of our participants have disappeared. One of them we think was killed. Several of them have had guns pulled on them because the bigger drug dealers in Oakland are still monitoring them. And so you deal with that, you deal with the fact that conservatives in San Francisco, yes, they do exist, going after Chesa, and they successfully go after him, and Dale Manami and I tried to run interference between the Asians who are claiming that if Chesa was only stronger, that it would reduce the anti-Asian hate violence in San Francisco. And so we tried to bring together the people that sued, the Asians, Americans who sued Chesa Boudin on behalf of a bogus claim that was made by an elderly Chinese guy who had a run-in with an African American in San Francisco Chinatown that was total bullshit, and we do try to quiet that down a little bit. We offered Dale as the mediator with the city attorney, who we know, David Chu, who is a band member that is with me in an oldies group, and Shauna's husband, Robert Hirsch. It's a crazy life. And but it doesn't help. It's too little, too late, and he gets thrown out. But fortunately, that UCAP program, the Unaccompanied Children's Assistance Program, has still been going on. That Brooke Jenkins, the district attorney of San Francisco, knows that it's working. And so she wants to keep sending us cases. But yeah, it's crazy work. It's important work, I think. I don't think I'm deluding myself, but my God, listen, I don't buy the Louis Brandeis version of what Ascanio was alluding to, that we're trained to think that we know everything. That's bullshit, of course. But I do think that because some of us have a license, that we can do some pretty good day-to-day work and make a difference. unfortunately, the times are such that the work is ever more important. So, a final complete digression. You know, Jerry, yesterday when you were speaking to the high school students and you told them to walk around this place like they own the place, I want you to know, and I won't out her, but I want you to know that there was a person in this room that I knew. If she had heard that from you when she was in high school, she would have gone to UCLA. And she grew up not that far from here. And she was offered, she was a young Latina, she was offered admission to UCLA. Working class parents had no idea about how to access tuition money, how to access scholarships, how to operate in this world. And so she couldn't go to UCLA because she just didn't know how to access that. And, you know, so I'm so happy that you said that to the high school students. Thank you.
So a superficial reading of the program might lead people to think that this was going to be a conversation about kind of work-life balance. I was actually talking to a friend of mine in New Mexico who had seen the description and had said, "That's so strange that you're on a panel about work-life balance, and I'm going to be sitting in the front row winking at you." We really took a different path here for important reasons, but I also know that it is a really important, we took a different path and we didn't. We also really did address how integrating work and life looks for many of the folks on the panel. And with that said, I think it's a very important question, particularly given the constraints that folks are working under. And I know that Ascanio has done some writing about that and has thought about kind of what might be helpful for students to think about that. So I wanted to turn it to you to sort of open up about that.
Great, thank you. Can I get a show of hands? How many of you are could the law students raise your hands? How many of you law students really can't stand law school?
Whoa.
Oh my goodness.
What's wrong with you?
That is so wonderful to see. One of the classes that Sean and I had been teaching together for a while that I'm still teaching is our seminar for social justice lawyering concentrators. And I think this generation and recent generations really have an appreciation for the importance of self-care and sustainability, and I applaud them for wisdom that I think previous generations didn't have in equal measure. But simultaneously, I don't really buy the notion of, I don't buy the implicit assumption in the notion of work-life balance, with like a hard slash between it's either work or it's life, and the assumption that life is always great. Life is where you regenerate, and work is where you stultify or exhaust yourself. Good God, if I didn't love my work right now, I would not be here. Sometimes family drains everything from you. And Gary talked about, when you are fighting together with people, the connection that builds. And Brenda and Bill's work, and Tara hasn't talked about hers, we are so privileged as lawyers, and I think particularly as we try to be rebellious lawyers, to have a world in which our work is really potentially an expression of our values. So I have tried, not particularly successfully, to suggest to my students that work-life balance is not necessarily the only aim to have, that aspiring to an integration of work and life is a real opportunity that we have. So I will not go on for Peckian lengths and stop there.
If I may, I think it is precisely because of the way you define doing work rebelliously, that is to say, what can we do together, that the work lifts us up, that the work really does permit us to integrate and to give life to our values and to what we care most deeply about. And for me, it was always, by the way, full disclosure, I'm not a licensed attorney. I may be the only guy who went to Stanford Law School, never sat for the bar, never aspired to be a lawyer, did aspire to be an advocate who worked with lawyers. So organizing, for instance, was a huge big deal for me, and a huge big deal for the ACLU when I was building it up, which meant, again, encouraging my lawyer, the standard riff was, we're all lawyers here, but they had no idea, all organizers here, but they had no idea what organizing was about, like none at all, which isn't to suggest that organizers can't be regnant, but I do think it's the vision of practice that you set forth. And I read that piece you wrote about integrating life, personal and professional life, and I thought it was quite wonderful, and I thought it captured in really important ways why everyone in this room is immensely privileged. And just one more reason why we owe a debt of gratitude to Jerry, because he taught us how to think about and do the work in ways that permit us to integrate that way.
Brenda, when you're thinking about this, are there any thoughts that you want to put into the conversation about kind of a healthy life and doing the work?
Yes, but first I do want to thank Bill, because we're making him work, putting groups of people and helping an advocate here. But yes, I think part of being healthy or having a healthy lifestyle for me, and I think for a lot of us that we really don't speak about, is kind of the needs that we have for our family. And I know for a lot of us, and especially communities of color, we have to continue to help our family even when we're law school students or college students, and even after law school. So working for a nonprofit for me was not really a feasible reality. I think right now this generation has better options, thanks to great nonprofits like the ILRC that have people like Maisha who can be able to actually hire fairly paid, reasonable wages. I think when I was applying for nonprofit jobs, I think the salary was anywhere from $38,000 to $45,000 at the most, and that was not sustainable. I still needed to help my parents. And I think, what ends up happening, and I really felt like women of color were perfect for certain jobs working with immigrants because they could tolerate the work emotionally, they were willing to do the sacrifice, and they were willing to get paid very little for. And I And I think that same system is replicated in the private practice, of course. We have employers who do not try to seek for the well-being of their staff. It's the reason why I have only one, because I feel like if I can just make the difference with one. And I'm so proud of Misty. She's sitting in the back, and she's going to be a future rebellious attorney. But part of my sanity is learning how to surround myself with great people. And I think, Jerry, I was a co-chair here, and I have my two co-chairs from the Raza, what used to be the name of the organization here, Julia Vasquez and Marta Gomez. And I remember we would always try to ask Jerry to please come to the events, and Jerry would say no. And I think it's because, aside from the fact that he's texting all of these wonderful and communicating with all of these wonderful people, he has no time for these other issues. I think what he taught us was don't waste your time with people that don't know how to roll and are not the real deal. And I think that is one of the most valuable lessons, because I've surrounded myself with great people, not just allies, but my own staff, and learning how to treat them with respect. But I think, part of the work that we don't really talk about, and Escanio, obviously reflects that on his pieces, is really what happened. Jerry's so resilient. Like, I know he talks about his confidence, but that's not the way that I grew up, right? There was a lot of emotional trauma coming up and growing up in poverty, and we really don't talk about it. And it does affect when you want to be rebellious. And for me, it was a problem because I wanted to be so empathetic with my clients that I took on a lot of that burden. And, I had a credible fear interview. It was 3 hours, the other day, and it took me about an hour and a half to unwind. And that's not affordable when I have a baby now. And I don't want that energy to be with her. So now I have to be very decisive also about the clients, because I have abusive clients. I have clients that are sexist, that are racist, and I have to say no. And it's not just easy to do that, because as Bill would know, once you begin representation, it's very difficult to leave. But these are kind of the realities that are difficult. But I have Jerry here. We're mentioning about having Jerry here on our shoulder. Is how are we going to make it work? And I refuse to give up my office, even if I'm not making, a lot of money or giving the benefits that I wish that I could give to my assistants. I refuse, because I know that I want to provide that rebellious love. I want to be a rebellious advocate. I want to choose the cases that I want. But I've had to find that inner resiliency, and I've had to do a lot of self-healing stuff. I'm a Reiki master. That happened during COVID. And it's like you do whatever you have to do to survive, right? But I feel like maybe we don't talk about that part of how difficult it is to be rebellious, because we feel like that's that personal, baggage. But I feel like this generation is a lot better with dealing with that. So I'm very hopeful. Yeah. Bill?
Yeah, thanks, Tara. For my final comments, I'm actually going to digress again and talk about affirmative action, because I'm largely speaking to the Asians in the room. Like Professor Thaxton cited yesterday in that panel, the excellent amicus brief that was developed by those who understand the numbers. There's actually an excellent amicus brief by Asian American sociologists and scholars debunking the bullshit that the Asian Americans that were recruited by Ed Blum to be part of that plaintiff's suit. The affirmative action is it's a Rorschach test for Asian Americans. It's how we view race and the United States. And it's something that I have a love-hate relationship with middle class, upper middle class Chinese American families in San Francisco because they came to me more than 20 years ago to help them bring a lawsuit against Lowell High School, and I turned it down because they wanted me to challenge the affirmative action program at Lowell High School. I turned it down, and that case was accepted by a law professor from Hastings, and they won that case, and they dismantled the affirmative action program at Lowell High School. And there's no such thing as an Asian penalty. The Harvard program, listen, I can't believe we're defending the fucking Harvard program, because if you look at the numbers, and Brother Sharon probably knows this better than me, my understanding is that the last Harvard class, something like, there were more people from the top 1% earners than the rest of the 90% of the rest of the population. And so, it wasn't anything to brag about. And in fact, Asian Americans actually benefited from affirmative action at Harvard and at North Carolina. So I'm very disappointed in the fact that Asian Americans were brought in and recruited by Blum to play that role, and I really wish that we could look at all that differently. Thanks.
Thanks. Well, let's give it up for the panel. Thank you all so much.